That's not a fedora.
It's more of an indie fedora than your fedora.
Okay. It's a trilby. I get it. It is black. I get it. But it's the best I had. Okay? Get off my back. Gosh.
Get off my plane.
Wrong franchise. Okay.
Oh, damn.
Hello, interwebs, and welcome to Close Up. I'm your co-host, Joe.
And I'm Ryan.
Today, we're talking about the Indiana Jones quadrilogy in advance of Dial of Destiny. So, full spoilers ahead for all those movies. You've been warned. From our extreme long shot, let's move into our medium shot and talk about our history with the Indiana Jones franchise. So, Ryan, where did you first see these movies, and how'd you get into this?
I believe I saw these movies as a kid, just on regular cable growing up. I don't think my parents introduced me to these movies, but I distinctly remember watching Raiders of the Lost Ark on TV, and distinctly remember watching Last Crusade on TV. I don't know when I slipped in Temple of Doom. And then I think I saw Crystal Skull in theaters. I'm pretty sure. Vague memory. Possible. I don't know. But I love these movies. I think they're phenomenal. Great action, great acting, all that stuff. It is part of my filmography childhood in terms of storytelling and mystery, and it was on my list as a kid, like what would be a cool profession, and being an archaeologist was cool, but that's only because of Harrison Ford, so.
Yeah. Well, the Indiana Jones movies are a little weird for me, because on the one hand, Raiders of the Lost Ark specifically is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. It's a pretty fun, in terms of my inspirations of as a filmmaker and writer, what I want my work to look like, it would be very similar to Indiana Jones style. And I'll get into why more later. But in terms of these kind of movies, the tone, everything they're going for is everything I love about movies. It's pure escapism at its finest, and definitely had an impact on me as a kid. That said, it's also a weird franchise because I never seem to be as into it as other people. I'll be honest, I think I've only rewatched most of these movies like once in my whole life. Maybe I've only seen them once or twice. I don't think I've rewatched Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, or Kingdom of the Crystal Skull since I was a kid. So most of this is just from memory and cultural osmosis. Raiders of the Lost Ark I've seen multiple times though, just because that one stood out to me the most. But I do remember them all. It's crazy how even though I've barely rewatched these movies, I still remember most things about them in a way. And maybe that is just because of the cultural osmosis, like I said, but I think it's just, I choose to believe it's just because they were that memorable and impactful on me as a kid. I only needed to see them once, and they stuck with me my entire life. So it's a very magical franchise, and I'm looking forward to Dial of Destiny, but I'm not that excited about it. We'll see. We'll talk about that more later.
Cautious.
Yeah. But yeah, full spoilers ahead for these movies. By the way, I think I did say that up top, but I just wanted to reiterate. I don't know, we're going to do this probably one by one, but it's probably going to jump around a lot. But yeah, let's get into our close-up and start talking Indiana Jones. You got somewhere you want to start?
Just start at the beginning, man. Raiders.
Start at the beginning with John Williams' score coming up in the South American jungle. You see these guys in silhouettes going through the jungle, checking maps. You never see Indy outright, just his silhouette. The fedora silhouettes on the trees, I believe, just as they're going. You see his back. Then somebody whips out a gun on him. The bullwhip cracks and he walks out of the shadows. Steven Spielberg's filmmaking on this scene, just right up top. One of my favorite things about Raiders, and I'll just jump right into the filmmaking element. It's like Steven Spielberg made this movie knowing it would be iconic. It's like that scene of Indy walking out of the shadows and stuff. That's a kind of scene that would play for nostalgia bait today. if they were trying to reintroduce Indiana Jones as a character everybody loved. But right from the opening scene of Raiders in his introduction, Steven Spielberg it's like he anticipates people are going to be waiting for this and everyone's going to come back to this movie just like, whoa, it's Indy.
Yeah.
Like,
I always forget, I don't know why, that Spielberg directed this movie. Mm-hmm. It's not because I don't think it's one of his best, obviously, but it's just one of those things where it's like early 80s movies, why is this so good? And then you see his name pop up, you're like, oh, of course, because it's Spielberg. And you just realize how much like iconic stuff he's been in. I've been going through that phase recently. Like I just watched, I rewatched Rounders recently that had Matt Damon in it. I rewatched Ocean's 11. I'm going through the Ocean's movies right now. Ocean 12 is a bit boring, but it's not that bad. Anyway, you just forget like how much iconic stuff. Like Matt Damon has like maybe 80% more hits than misses. He's been in so much stuff. And that's what I say with Spielberg too, where he just has so many hits. He's one of probably one of the best directors of all time. He's phenomenal. And I think it was him, he stated he wanted to direct a James Bond movie. But I think there was a thing with American directors or whatever. And then his buddy George Lucas was like, well, I have this character who's kind of like James Bond, but he's kind of has his own twist to him. He goes, yeah, I'll direct it. And then he creates one of the best franchises of the time. And it's just funny how that works. Also, I need to correct myself. Probably months ago on the podcast, I said they didn't want to cast Harrison Ford as Han Solo because he cast him in something else. It was actually this, where Harrison Ford just did American Graffiti, and he didn't want to, and I think he didn't want to do Indiana Jones because he just worked with George, or George just worked with him, and he didn't want to be one of those people who only worked with one actor for a lot of the time. But then he does the screen test, and then the rest is history. So I had to correct myself on that because I thought for the longest time it was Han Solo, but it was actually Indiana Jones.
Very interesting. Yeah, Indiana Jones, they based off of, I believe, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
The guy from the third movie.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, sorry. I said the guy from the third movie.
The guy from the third. I know Steven Spielberg and George Lucas both had a love of pulp adventure serials from the 1930s. Mm-hmm. Star Wars was based on the sci-fi serials of that time, so I know George Lucas was definitely a fan of those. The Flash Gordons, the Buck Rogers, that kind of thing. I don't really know specifically what Indiana Jones was based on, if there was a popular serial, but I just know they were based on that vibe of classic heroic adventurers going to exotic locations and, well, kind of like a James Bond sort of thing as well. Like you said, Steven Spielberg wanted to put his spin on James Bond, and the American James Bond is a little more rough around the edges kind of idea. But he's, Indiana Jones kind of is the American James Bond in many ways. With, he doesn't work directly for the government. He's more of a freelancer. He's got that American streak of independence and moral righteousness to him as well. But yeah, I mean, if you're going through this opening scene, though, going back to the iconography, there's so much. Just this cold open is like I said, there's the shadows, the silhouettes, the crack of the bullwhip. Then they go into the temple, and there's the classic scene of him looking at the golden idol. They're avoiding all these traps, and then you go to the idol, switch it out with the sandbag, triggers the trap, runs away from the boulder.
I love he gets it wrong. I love it because like most of the time, probably back in the day, they just get him right. But I love he's just like a little bit off, or I love that. You
build your hero up as a badass, and he's pretty smart too. Evidently, we've seen him dodge multiple traps at this point, gets to the thing, and then he screws up. So it shows immediately, okay, this guy's a badass, but he's not infallible. He can screw things up in a death-defying way, but then we have to watch him get out of it, which is most of the fun of these movies. And then that giant boulder is one of the most, I think this setup and consequence are one of the most iconic action scenes in cinema. How many times has it been parodied with somebody trying to take something important and then switching it out with something that doesn't work. And then sometimes they'll be chased by a boulder or something just as an homage. But like the sandbag switching is iconic. The boulder is iconic. Him trying to make the getaway out of the temple after Belloc steals the thing and the natives are chasing him through the woods, and then he gets onto the biplane and there's a snake in there. Like, I hate snakes, Jock.
One of the best openings of all time. I'm having trouble finding a better one on memory right now.
It's everything about it is so iconic. Good. Everything.
There's nothing to fear. That's what scares me. Woohoo!
I think that moment also stuck with me where I think it's Alfred Molina.
That's Alfred Molina. Yeah, actually, that's Alfred Molina too.
where Alfred Molina, on his way out of the temple, you just see his face impaled with the spikes.
That shocked me as a kid. I was like, "Oh,
I saw this movie when I was movie." Yeah, I saw this movie when I was a little kid, and that's got to be one of the most graphic things I'd ever seen in a film up to that point. When I was, I don't know, 5 years old.
It's like it's a jump scare, but not a cliche jump scare. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was.
You're just like, Jesus.
The spike sticking out of his face and all that. That's a visceral image that scarred me as a child. Which, you know what? No shot on my parents. I'm glad they showed me that stuff. I think kids need to be scarred just a little bit.
Just a little.
You have to have memorable things.
Yeah.
Like that happened.
It's shots like that, and then the boulder. Yeah. When I've recently watched this, like a year ago, was like, yeah, this is definitely ILM.
But I will say, they let me watch that, but they made me avert my eyes in Temple of Doom with the guy ripping the heart out of his chest, and like I think I've only seen Temple of Doom once or twice, so I've never actually seen that scene play out in the movie.
Well, you're going to.
So yeah, my parents had certain levels of violence that was acceptable and some that was a little graphic. Temple of Doom pushed the line at the time, but yeah, great.
Violence was never a problem in my family, but my mom always made me cover my eyes when two people were like kissing or banging.
Interesting.
It's like, what's happening? It's like, no, don't look.
I got that to an extent as well. But yeah, so what happens next? After that, we meet Professor Jones at his university, find out he's got a relatively normal life. This badass archaeologist, dodging traps, whipping guys, and stealing cultural artifacts.
Also dodging potential harassment lawsuits from his students, where he closes her eyes and says, I love you.
Yep.
He's just like, oh God. I get it, he's hot, but come on now.
Weren't we all thinking it though?
Who cares? No, we're all thinking it. He's good looking. You think those are real glasses? You think he's just putting them on for show?
Well, maybe he's nearsighted or farsighted.
Maybe, who knows? Well, there's a theory because he puts them on when he's reading part of the Grail tablet in the third one. But like for the other two, he just like puts them on when he's like the professor. But
they're just reading glasses then, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, the costume in these movies are fantastic. Just all the different states that he's in, and it's distinct from each movie to movie.
Yeah, I love his professor outfit.
It's really good. I think I really love this franchise because I played the Lego game on DS so much as a kid.
Oh yeah.
So I've played through the games multiple times. So I just know.
I played through both of them. There was the original Lego game, which was just the Indiana Jones trilogy, and then there was the complete Indiana Jones, which had Crystal Skull in there as well.
Which I wonder if they'll do the fifth one. Who knows?
They probably will.
Yeah.
Put their own spin on. I mean, they just released the other year. They did the Skywalker saga with. So they went.
It's pretty fun, actually. I've played a few levels. It's really fun.
Yeah, I'm still on the Phantom Menace because I was playing with my brother and we just never got back to it.
I mean, you can skip. You can skip the prequels. No, I'm just kidding.
That's not the part I want to skip.
I think what's cool about those games, though, you can start from any trilogy or the Skywalker saga. Yeah, which is
you started
nice.
1, 4, 7.
Yeah, couldn't do it back in the day. You had to go in order.
You had to do.
Kids have it so easy today. Anyway, but Raiders is one of those movies where it just has iconic scene after iconic scene. It's just because it was one of those movies to just do it first in these terms of action and storytelling. I think what happens next is He goes to the office and then he meets up with
the army agents, or
the
US
army agents, and they talk about Ark of the Covenant. And he does he does it like what I love about that scene is he's like it's like he's teaching a classroom, and the one agent leans in like he's fully infatuated about what he's saying. I think it's like unintentional, but it's so funny to me. And then he goes to see Ravenwood, or tries to find Ravenwood, and there's that scene where they're in the bar. Marion
instead drinking some guy under the table.
So good. So good. I love
Marion. Her as well.
She's great. Yeah. And I believe it. I believe she could hold her liquor. Just how she carries herself and how she acts throughout the scene too. Excuse me. Which also a little concerning because she acts completely sober when Indy walks in. Or maybe she just sobers up. Or maybe the other guy's a lightweight. We never know. Alcohol works in strangest ways, kids. Stay away from vices.
Or maybe she's just good at acting. Solid around him. Just trying to put on her best face when her ex walks through the door.
Yeah. And there was like an age gap there that's maybe not great, but hey, it was the 40s. So anyway.
Yeah, that's been pretty well documented by now. There's a line where she said she was just 15 when they met, something like that.
But hey, the actress who played Marion Crane said it's okay, so we should be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, their relationship was set in a different time, which doesn't make it okay by today's standards, but yeah.
Still a great movie.
But what I will say about it, it's a weird positive spin on it, but like in a dark way. But I also like that it paints Indiana Jones as not 100% good guy.
Yeah.
Like he will.
I mean, he straight up murders people in this.
Like he straight up murders people. He'll kind of take advantage of the naive heart of a 15-year-old girl and then break her heart later. Like he's kind of a dick. He's not a squeaky clean hero, and the movie doesn't try to make him out to be either. Those flaws, you can rail against him a lot, try to cancel Indiana Jones for this or that. Oh yeah, he also, as I've been reading lately, some people remind me, he also, steals a lot of cultural artifacts out of their home and destroys ancient temples and all that. He's like, he does a lot of stuff that by today's standards is kind of morally reprehensible. But I also appreciate that he's allowed to have nuance. Modern characters in this kind of vein either have to be like, look at the new Uncharted movie, for example, right? They take all the grit out of Nathan Drake in that movie, and they make him as squeaky clean as possible, and it doesn't feel the same. You need that kind of grit and flaws to make an interesting character, and that's what endears Indy to me, is that he is ultimately trying to do the right thing for right reasons, but he's not a hero, he's not an anti-hero, but I don't know. He's heroic for the time. In this time, this was considered an ideal guy to be, and he's still got a lot of good traits to look up to. But we with a modern lens.
And to be fair, most of the people he killed were Nazis. So
who cares?
Get over it, people. I think people need to realize that archaeology is just legalized grave robbing. So get over it.
Yeah, but the difference between Indiana Jones and the grave robbers, which I think. That's a scene in Last Crusade where he's upset that the grave robbers are stealing this ancient artifact. The difference is these grave robbers are trying to steal stuff for their own personal profit, or in the case of the Nazis, because they're going to use it to further their evil agendas by trying to use it for selfish reasons. It gives them power. Indy is now once again, you can say all you want about how he destroys the temples or takes the artifacts from their native cultures, but he also respects them for their historical value. He wants to see them preserved in a museum where all can enjoy them and learn from them. So once again, it's a flawed reasoning, but it's still, in his own mind, a selfless one. He's not looking for personal power or wealth. He could sell these things for like the actual Ark of the
Profit,
Covenant.
yeah.
Who knows how much he could sell that for, right? But he knows it's not his to sell. It's bigger than him. And that's what sets him apart.
They're taken away by top men.
Yeah, well, U.S. Army, whatever.
Top men.
But yeah, well, that's part of the nuance of these stories is that it's not... Yeah, he doesn't do the purely heroic things by the today's standards, but by the standards of the 1930s and or even the 80s when the movie came out, he's still seen as a pretty good guy,
badass.
if not. Yeah.
I would take Indiana Jones over any other quote unquote iconic character we've gotten in the 2000s. Just like, because most of the time they're either super like squeaky clean or they just fall into like the anti-hero, but they're more clean than dirty.
Or you get modern characters who are so hyper clean and virtue signaling that it nearly becomes like self-parody. And it's like, oh, the creators are trying to make you so flawless because we're supposed to be endeared to you. But because you're so in
like
everybody's business.
Like who?
Well,
I know what you're thinking.
Take any franchise, you name it. There's a character like that in it.
Could be another franchise written by George Lucas that you're thinking about. Well, not this version.
I wasn't even. I know who you're getting at. I wasn't even thinking of anyone specific.
Oh, okay.
It's just there is a character like that in every new franchise, or inserted into every old franchise that continued. Just somebody who's got to be better than you in every way, and like that especially sucks. When you have to compare them to the old people. Right? In the long-running franchise, there's somebody who's always better, more moral, more just better at everything, does it in a way that we as a modern audience would accept more, but it also doesn't feel genuine because it feels like, well, you're doing the right thing because it's obviously the right thing, but not because that's what your character would do. It takes all the nuance out of it and it takes the fun out of it. So... I mean, we'll get into more discussion of it, dissection of the indie character as it goes, but we've been going on a little long. I like that personally.
Yeah. I like the sound design of these movies as well. Like this is where you get the punch sound effect, like the classic indie punch sound effect. I think honestly, the first time you hear it is when Marion punches Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah,
and that to me that looks so real. I don't know if it's just because it was framed properly or she actually clocked him. But just the way both her and Harrison Ford acted, it looks like he actually got punched. And just maybe the added sound effect, or maybe it's just my delusional brain as a kid being like, oh, damn, she clocked him. Because usually it's a smack. But her, she's like, I'm clocking you. like right in the face right now. And then
which Marion is, hey, that's something Lucasfilm did really well back then. They don't have damsels in distress. They have pretty badass women who can hold their own. With the heroes. I mean, Marion gets captured a couple times, but she still, like Marion gets captured a couple times, but she still outwits the Nazi and to escape herself, and then Indy finds her. But
I would never call Marion or Princess Leia a damsel in distress. It's just like they get captured a few times and we have to go save them.
Yeah,
it's
but
just
they
like,
still hold their
my
own
friend's
while
captured.
They're there. Yeah.
Like even Leia saves Luke sometimes. Anyway, that's Star Wars. Sorry. Anyway, we love Lucasfilm.
It's Lucasfilm in the late 70s, early 80s. This is within 4 years of A New Hope. So it's basically...
Man, they had a good decade, eh?
You know what? I'll just get to this point now. That, for my money, Raiders of the Lost Ark is the ideal Lucasfilm film.
Yeah.
And I think that even over any of the Star Wars movies, to be honest... And I'll tell you why. This is a super tight screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan. This is directed by Steven Spielberg, who is one of the best directors of all time. Scored by John Williams, who's one of the best composers of all time. Story by George Lucas and John Williams. Story by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, who are two of the best creative minds to ever work. George Lucas is one of the most creative minds in Hollywood history. It's special effects by Industrial Light and Magic, starring Harrison Ford, one of the greatest actors to ever live. It's just, this movie is lightning in a bottle. It's got some of
It's
the
so
best
good.
talent working in 1981 or any era of Hollywood history. It's like everyone who either could be who was already kind of famous or would be more famous for the decades worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark. This was Lucasfilm firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say it's objectively a better movie than Empire Strikes Back or anything else they did after that. But to me, this was Lucasfilm operating at its peak in the early 80s. This was everybody at the top of their game.
Everybody is, yeah. I agree. This movie's so fucking good. I can't wait to rewatch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just this bar scene alone, I think is really good because it sets up Marion as a character, and then you have the Nazis come in and then you get the burn on the amulet, or the amulet, whatever it is. The something
reaches into the fire and grabs it.
Reaches in the fire, burns his hand.
Which I thought was really clever later in the movie when the Nazis found out about the amulet because of that burn. They looked more closely at it. Oh, it burned into your hand. We can use that.
They're digging in the wrong place. Hilarious.
Which is just a good
and I love
bit
at the
of
end, it's like, she's like, I'm your goddamn partner. Like her bar's burning down.
Yeah.
And then they cut to where they go to, where is it, Nepal? Where do they go to?
Next, they go to Cairo.
It's not Egypt. Cairo. That's what it. Okay.
Meet Salah.
Yeah, Cairo, Egypt. Yeah, Salah. Jonathan Rhys-Davies. Great guy. Guess what, everybody? He's tall. He's not like Gimli sized, okay? He's a tall dude. Great character.
He's coming back in number 5.
I know. That was a shocker. I didn't think they'd bring him back. I wonder if they'll bring back Short Round. I wonder. Maybe as a cameo.
I don't know.
Because he's shown up to set. And he showed up to the premiere.
Interesting.
So, who knows? Wink, wink. Anyway. Maybe here's my... At the end of the movie, you see Indy's hat fly away, and you think it's at Shia LaBeouf's feet. But whoever puts it on, and it's Short Round.
That'd be cool.
That'd be hilarious. I would love that.
So they're in Cairo. So Belloc is assisting the Nazis now to get to get the Ark of the Covenant, and they find out where the burn marks are, and they have that chase through the bazaar.
Chasing. This is where Indiana Jones straight up point blank shoots a guy in the head.
Yeah, because
he's driving the truck away.
Because Harrison Ford got food poisoning.
No, I'm talking about there's one time where he thinks Marion's in the back of a truck, and he climbs up, and as he's driving by, just straight up like bang right in the head, and you see the blood splatter on the camera, I think, and you're just like, oh my god, this professor's a murderer. But no, yeah, the sword fighter too, that one's funny because
classic.
Everybody was all sick. They had a planned fight scene, and Harrison Ford was like, can I just try something? And they're like, sure. And then he does the iconic improvised thing, and then everybody was feeling sick, so they're like, fuck it, let's just keep it. Like, let's move on.
See, that scene to me is both an iconic movie moment, and it also is another inspiring scene to me as a filmmaker, because that shows that it's a prime example of the planned version isn't always the best way to go.
Yeah.
Everyone expected, they're like, oh, in this action movie, let's have a really cool choreographed fight. Sure. Of course we're going to do that. Yeah, Indiana Jones fights this sword guy. There was probably a really cool fist fight choreographed. Somebody probably put a lot of work into that. It would have been awesome, I'm sure. But the better creative choice, which was also the choice the audience would expect a big fight too, because everything's leading up to a big fight. That's just cinematic language. We're trained to expect, these guys are squaring off for something big. And then, nope, he just shoots him, which is better for multiple reasons. A, it shows Indy is smart because a guy shows up with a sword and you got a gun. Of course, you're just going to shoot him. You're not going to be baited into a stupid fist fight. So A, it shows Indiana Jones as a smart character. B, it subverts audience expectations because movie logic trains us to think that even though the guy's got a gun, he's going to end up into a fist fight with him somehow or something, or it's going to get close quarters somehow. And then, internet commenters weren't a thing. But if they were back then, they'd be like, he had a gun on his hip. Why did he just shoot him? So everybody was 40 years ahead of that. But yeah, I think it's a good subverting moment and makes Indy look like a better character in the process. So a lot goes there. You could learn a thing from that scene.
Yeah. And then they kill off Marion. What?
Halfway through the movie? It's not the first time a Marion getting killed halfway through the movie would be shocking.
Mm-hmm. And I also like how he's actually distraught about it. Where I think in like modern movies now where they'd be distraught about it during the scene, but they wouldn't, like for instance, they wouldn't go like what Indy does here. He wouldn't go to a bar to drink his sorrows away. Like here, I feel like they do a scene where it's like, my friend's gone. And then the next scene, they just completely forget about it. Where here, he's like actually distraught about it and it affects him. And then he meets up with Belloq again. I love Belloq in this movie, not because I don't see him as threatening. I just love that he's just a complete annoyance to Indiana Jones. I love their banter.
But a competent annoyance too. He got the idol at the beginning because he outwitted him. He's working with the Nazis. It's like, yeah, I could take you in a fight, but you're partnering with more powerful allies here, and I can't take you right now.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just like, he's on Indiana Jones all the time, and it's just, he's got more money, he's got more power, and I just love, it's not like, he's not a physical threat, but he's an intellectual threat, and I think for the time, that was really smart to do and very different to do.
And I think that's what some other Indiana Jones movies are kind of missing, is that on that equal footing, is that this guy is... He's a villain that's of equal intelligence to Indiana Jones. He's also a professor, a studier of archaeology. He's nearly like a Moriarty to his Sherlock Holmes in a way. He's like the dark antithesis of what Indiana Jones would be if he treasure hunted for wealth and fame instead of for preservation and historical value. So I like that
he himself is not a Nazi technically, but he's just using the Nazis' power and their resources to just get what he wants. And to him, he's able to step over that moral high ground because it's the easiest thing for him and he's got the money to do it. And there's scenes throughout the movie that shows that, like, I don't fully agree with these guys, but they got all the shit that I need. So I'm going to use their resources to gain my power.
I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the Ark of the Covenant because I want to be the guy who found the Ark of the Covenant. So what, I've got to work with Nazis to do it. It's a means to an end. Will history remember I was the guy who worked with the Nazis? No, they'll remember I was the guy who found God's Ark.
Exactly.
So
I think he's a great villain. I think he's not talked about enough because I think Indiana Jones is just so iconic that he's not overshadowed, but I think people just forget about Belloq a lot.
Definitely.
But then Marion's back. Shocker. Marion's alive. Survived. She's in a tent.
Held at the enemy camp.
And she fake flirts with Belloq in a great way. And I love they get absolutely plastered. And I love when she pulls a knife on him. His immediate thought is like, oh fuck. They both burst out laughing.
But you know what?
They're that drunk.
But see, that was a Chekhov's gun situation because her introduction is her drinking guys under the table. So if you're thinking about it, you're like, oh, wait, she can hold her liquor. We already know that.
Yeah, exactly. Throughout I think it's a brilliant scene. But just like to highlight that as well, I think the cliche thing to do is like, she pulls out the knife and then everything's serious. But she pulls out the knife and they're losing their minds.
Yeah.
He's like, you got me there. Because he's like drunk as hell. And then the gag when the Nazi walks in and he's got like this choker device, but it turns into a coat hanger. Yeah. It's just great. This movie's great. And then
the humor is really underappreciated as well. It's got a lot of good jokes.
It's got that classic George Lucas, Steven Spielberg comedy where it's subverting your expectations.
Once again, this is one of the reasons I love this movie so much is the tone of it. If you make this movie nowadays, it's either a complete farce or it's deadly serious. But they were taking inspiration from their childhood movies of these adventure serials, which you didn't take too seriously at the time, really, because they were you just went to the movie theater, they played for, 10 minutes or so. Maybe you saw the next installment of it the next week at the movies, whatever. They were disposable entertainment. But I believe the idea was take that disposable entertainment of our youth, have that same fun, freewheeling vibe to it that we loved about it, but bring it into the modern day with state-of-the-art filmmaking. I mean, these guys were the first generation who went to film school, so they're like, let's take those classic adventure stories and bring some legitimacy to them. Bring them, make them just serious enough that modern audiences will take it seriously, but keep the tone we loved as children because we want to replicate that. Like, why do it if we're not going to do it the way we liked it at the time?
Right.
And I think they perfectly found that balance of, yeah, this is a fun globe-trotting adventure where you fight Nazis, swing on bullwhips, punch guys in the face, ride on horses and trucks and like crazy action scenes. And there's a lot of humor, but there's also a lot of dark and serious moments.
Yeah.
You're like at the end when they're staring at the Ark. I'm skipping ahead a bit. But like when they're staring at the Ark and all the Nazis are getting killed and faces are melting, that's 100% serious. It's all
100% real too. All that practical stuff. Well, I mean, yeah, it's all technically real because they were drawing on the ghosts. The melting faces are insane. And one scene I like to highlight, we kind of skipped a little bit when Indy's in the temple and he's got the staff of Ra. I keep saying Ra. And then the light shines on it and then it points to one and you just see Harrison Ford's face like glow up because underneath he's just a huge dork. Like he's like he has this badass persona. But
like,
he's a man of archaeology. He's like, this is so cool. And it's just
uncovering
great,
ancient ruins, finding hidden puzzles.
John Williams' score throughout that scene like builds and builds and builds and builds. And the tone throughout this movie is so good. And the action's really good. I mean, when they're escaping on the plane and he's fighting the big dude, it's well paced. I mean, there's moments where the guy's like, come on, let's fight. And he's just like, give me a second. Like, he's just like, just give me a sec. And he tries, and then like he gets hit once and he's like already on the ground because he's so big.
That's another childhood trauma.
Yeah, about that childhood actor. Or
when he goes through the propeller.
Yeah. The thing about that giant actor, though, the big guy, he's technically in all three films. He's in Temple of Doom where he plays like a giant guy in... He's got
some kind of regalia.
I mean, it's a little bit of he's kind of a bit of brown face, but you know, whatever.
That's the guy he gets sucked under
the turban. Yeah, he gets sucked into the thing.
He gets sucked under the grinder, and that's another childhood trauma. He's the blood smear on the. Doesn't he also get sucked under the boat in Last Crusade? Into that propeller?
No, he's not. He's in a deleted scene in the Last Crusade.
Oh, okay.
So the third movie, you can see him walking with one of the Nazis when Harrison Ford and Sean Connery are in the blimp. But they did have a fight scene planned out, but I think Harrison Ford was injured at the time or something like that, or they had filmed it, but then they just scrapped it. So technically, he's in all three films, which is really cool.
Interesting.
But yeah, that plane scene's really good because Morin's actually doing something. She's not a damsel. She's trying to figure stuff out.
She's trying to get the plane working.
And then inevitably they fuck up and they just blow up the whole thing.
That's a great shot,
and it's real explosions. Whoo! It's an amazing shot. I love real explosions.
Extreme long shot running away off the landing and everything's blowing up around. Beautiful.
It's so iconic that they use it at Universal Studio live shows. They use that set piece and you can feel the heat from that far away. I love real life explosions in film. I don't care how bad for the environment they are. They look great. They look great on film.
Yeah.
And I just love that scene. And then when the car chase, when Indy goes under the truck and he's trying to grab on the stuff, but it keeps breaking. You're like, oh God, he's grabbing the freaking Mercedes head thing and it's bending down.
Yeah.
And then he ties the rope or his whip under the thing and he's sliding. You're like, oh my God.
Getting dragged around on the gravel.
Who does this? Who makes this type of action? It's amazing work.
And these are action scenes like you see in some movies where you're like, that's kind of cheesy or looks bad today. These action scenes still hold up today. The choreography is still great. This truck scene in particular is still pretty burned in my brain of like, wow, that's some crazy stunt work they did on that. Going on these moving trucks. He's going into the truck, out of the truck, under the truck. Hanging on by the whip as it's going, riding up horses alongside it, knocking guys out in there.
John
going
Williams score
going
blaring
through the
in background.
windshields.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Whenever, and then in that scene where Indy gets shot in the arm, I wince every time because you see like the blood splatter on the windshield. You're like, fuck. But then later on, he does this and he checks on it again, and it's almost like it stops bleeding. I know it doesn't, but he's kind of like, I'll just deal with it later.
That also leads to another iconic scene when they're on the boat and Marion's like, where does it hurt? Here. Here.
Here a little bit. Yeah. And then he falls asleep making out, and she's like, men.
Good scene.
And we should address the theory that if Indiana Jones wasn't in the movie, then the plot wouldn't have changed. That's bullshit. All right?
Definitely.
Because they wouldn't have been able to find the Ark or blah, blah, blah. And I know it's like a joke that happens in like a Big Bang Theory episode, but how dare you? It's one of the greatest movies of all time.
I mean, would it have played out similarly? Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe, but he found it first.
Yeah.
And he was also the one who, recovered it after the Nazis killed themselves with it. Without him, that Ark would just be hanging out on the island afterwards, and somebody else would have found it. So that was important for him to be there at the end so he could haul it back to the U.S. government, if anything. So.
Oh, and people also wonder, how did Indiana survive outside the submarine? There's a deleted scene where he's hanging on to the antenna because it's not a fully submerged submarine. It's just almost over the surface. And he's just kind of like floating.
Right.
He looks miserable, but that's what anyway.
Oh yeah, Marion would have died multiple times without him. The Nazis would have got her in the first scene at the bar, probably.
Absolutely.
Stolen that medallion. Mm-hmm. And yeah, she's resourceful. She could have gotten out for a while, but I don't think she could have gotten out fully without his help.
Anyway, should we move on to Temple? Probably should.
Probably. Yeah, I guess the points I can make about Raiders I can make later. Temple of Doom. Now we're starting to get into the stuff I don't remember as much, but so we're not going to get as detailed, I bet. But we'll, I remember a lot.
So this one's technically a prequel because it's set 1 year before Raiders.
Yes, which I think I should address that. I don't think prequels were really a thing back then. I don't know if I want to call it the first prequel movie, but it's
right.
Like, I remember when Phantom Menace came out, right? That was a huge deal. What do you mean this movie set before? And Temple of Doom was a lot more subtle about it. If you didn't remember the movie was set in 1936, seeing that 1935 title card probably wouldn't be off-putting. You wouldn't think anything of it.
Mm-hmm.
The Phantom Menace made a lot more of its marketing based around the fact that, yes, this is 30 years before A New Hope. You need to know that going in. Temple of Doom's a subtle prequel, but I can't think of any other movie before Temple of Doom that was actually... Well, come to think of it, there weren't many big franchises at all back in the early 80s. There's maybe only, I don't know, off the top of my head, you had James Bond, Planet of the Apes, Rocky, Star Wars, Star Trek, but not many. At that time, it's
definitely one of the first.
Yeah.
It has a great, Temple Doom has a great opening in the Chinese restaurant, I believe, or Japanese restaurant.
The nightclub, whatever. The
nightclub, great opening where, and again, shows the character of Indiana Jones is not always good. He's like, give me the antidote, or I'll straight up stab this woman. I will straight up stab this woman in the gut who I just met.
Well, that's what Temple of Doom does interesting, is make Indy
He's more grittier in this movie, I think.
He's a less good character in this. This is kind of his origin story of learning to be more selfless.
Mm-hmm.
From what I recall. Raiders of the Lost Ark, he was still kind of a dick, but he was also more of a hero. In Temple of Doom, he's more like Belloc, actually. He is more opportunistic and willing to, like he said, stab the innocent girl just to get away. A little more cutthroat. Less.
However, he's pretty chill with Short Round. That's like the only one he actually likes in this movie. The only person, anyway.
Well, Short Round doesn't bug him, holds his own.
Yeah.
What can you say? He's a good companion.
He sees him like a son. That's why I think he's going to show up in Dial of Destiny. Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Treats him more like a son than his actual son.
It's true.
Yeah.
So this is a weird one because it's notably darker because both Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were going through a breakup around the time, and they've admitted that they would have rewritten it a little bit differently if they were in a better mindset. And I have come out and said this is my least favorite, but I still think it's a good movie. It's a great movie.
Oh, yeah,
it's still got like iconic scenes, the opening, the car chase at the beginning as well. And the whole third act is probably some of the most crazy shit I've ever seen when I was a kid. In terms of how dark everything was.
Yeah, it's still very memorable stuff. It's I think the reason I never gravitated towards it was because, once again, even when I was a kid, it was the most taboo of them. This is the one where, like you said, parents cover your eyes because it's the most emotionally traumatizing probably to watch. And I think that's what it just didn't have the sense of fun of the other ones. It felt more grimdark, more serious, more like how I expect an Indiana Jones movie to be made today, or a couple of years ago when everything was a lot more dark and gritty. Specifically, it took that element of seriousness a bit too far and didn't keep enough of the fun of those early pulp serials. Which, you know what, I in the grand scheme of the franchise, I respect that because I don't want the sequel to feel the exact same. Last Crusade is more beloved because it felt like a return to form after they did something different. You need that shake-up every once in a while. Out of all the four, it's the dark Indiana Jones movie, and that's fine because at least it has something that sets it apart. It's still good, and it's still its own thing. It doesn't blend in with the others. It's not, oh, well, it feels like Raiders and Last Crusade, but worse. It's doing its own thing. And I think the people who like it, and the people who don't like it, hate it. Well, that's too much, but you know what I mean? People who like it, like it. People who don't. It's same thing with Crystal Skull, which we'll get to later.
Oh, for sure.
But it's
the only like bad thing I could say about this is the female interest.
Willie.
She's terrible.
Well, we're talking about
she was directed in the way she was. I'm not dotting on the actress. I think she was made to look like that because of George and Steven were going through something. But she was just so annoying.
Yeah, this is a backslide for sure for female representation in action movies. We talked about how Marion and Princess Leia were really strong women, could hold their own. Willie is the classic damsel in distress. Screams at everything, needs to be rescued constantly, can't hold her own. Which, you know what, I'm gonna make a half-hearted defense of that and say that, seeing as this is a prequel, this proves, and this is part of Indiana Jones's character development, is to make him pal around with a woman that he knows that he'll never want another woman like this again. That's why Marion and Elsa are both ways.
That's funny.
That's what I'll say about that.
I like that. That's good.
He picked better later. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Annoying woman, Nazi woman. Which one is better? Anyway.
The Nazi woman didn't seem so bad till he knew she was a Nazi.
That's fair. Oh, man. But yeah, Temple of Doom. Yeah, this one's a strange one for me. But I still enjoy it a lot. I think, again, the set pieces are iconic. Lucasfilm knocks it out of the park.
Always.
Every time. Especially the actual Temple of Doom. Mola Ram is, I think, the most over-the-top evil villain you could ever have, but also super iconic.
Over the top works in certain contexts, and this is one of them.
Yeah, this is one of them, yeah, for sure. And I think for what they were going for, they nailed it in terms of the dark tone. I mean, the child slavery is another one where you're like, oh my God. See, like, watch this as a kid, you're like, Jesus Christ. Seeing Short Round get whipped was crazy.
Yeah, this is the one with guys getting their hearts ripped out of their chest, child slavery, guys getting eaten by crocodiles. It's graphically, oh yeah, they also eat monkey brains, I think, something like that.
Yeah. Don't worry, it's not real monkey brains, Joe.
I think there was that assassination scene. They got, I think.
Oh,
Willie,
yeah. And he like hangs himself on the fan by accident.
Yeah.
Or he throws his whip up. Yeah.
Yeah, and Willie gets covered in bugs, I think, at one point when they're going down the
hate that
corridors.
scene. Because there's just like giant insects. Disgusting.
It's also lit darker as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's satanic imagery or like, I guess the Indian version of satanic imagery. Yeah. The fiery pits. They nearly get drowned in the mines. Like the whole thing is set underground. Like you said, they're whipping children in slavery, brainwashing. It's creepy stuff.
Yeah, it's insane.
And this movie was PG.
Yeah. This is when the rating system mattered, kids.
Worth addressing that this was one of, I believe this and I think Gremlins were the two movies that convinced the Motion Picture Association to instill a new rating, PG-13, because this movie was not okay for children, and I think they realized that, but also they didn't have another rating. They're like, well, it's not hardcore enough to be R or X, and it's definitely not general audiences. PG's the best we got right now, so I guess that has to be PG. So then they came up with PG-13 because of this. They said, well, okay, so it's good for 13 and under, parental guidance needed, under, because yikes, some of this stuff.
I'd be proud if I was Steven Spielberg and that happened. I made a whole new rating.
Wouldn't you be glad as an artist to make that kind of seismic shift, make something that's either so offensive to somebody, that's something, or so inspiring that the industry you were working in changed because of what you made?
Yeah.
To every PG-13 you've ever seen in your life, thank Mr. Spielberg.
I will. I'll say that to him in person.
Thank you, Mr. Spielberg, for the PG-13 rating. It made me feel like more of an adult as a child. And
I can't remember if the main theme, I think this is the movie where the main theme is in it the least. Like the iconic Indiana Jones theme.
That's probably because, once again, if we're looking at this as a prequel, he's not. The Indiana Jones theme, and really any hero's theme in general, is used when the hero's being badass and doing their hero thing. This is, once again, the more opportunistic Indy. He's less heroic. He's more in it for himself or just out of circumstance. This is an Indiana Jones that doesn't deserve his theme as much.
Because he's employing children?
Yeah. Except for the moments that he does, of course, deserve it, and then he gets it. Which is supposed to, if they use it more sparingly, does make it feel more triumphant. Oh, the hero is doing the thing. But less so than Raiders of the Lost Ark. So that's something different. So it makes it feel more earned in a way. I hate when they just throw characters' themes into movies willy-nilly because it doesn't feel, it's like, well, you're just trying to get a reaction out of me. And yeah, it kind of worked for a second, but they didn't really deserve it. This wasn't as badass as the music is trying to make me think it was. I get that.
Oh, yeah.
Time.
It's like, there's like a, I'm going to dog on it again, but in Rings of Power, like the music it's composed by Bear McQuarrie, who's done the two recent God of War games. So, and he's just phenomenal. And there's like a scene in the end where they're crafting something, like they're crafting some stuff. And the music wants to make you think this is the greatest, this is what the show's been leading up to.
Yeah.
But just how the story's gone, it's like the music is trying so hard to carry it. That's like the most recent thing I can think of.
That's a good example.
I think one iconic scene that I can think of out of Temple of Doom is when they're in the mine carts.
Yes.
And they're going through, and it's filmed in a way where the wide shots, they're actually miniatures. Really? And they're little kind of like small puppets inside them. And it's like filmed really well and really fast where you don't even notice until someone points it out to you. And I think that's just a great scene on its own.
Yeah. Once again, ILM carrying their weight.
Yeah.
amazing.
The Juggernauts.
Love that scene on the bridge at the end.
Yeah,
That's
that one
another
too.
Iconic scene.
There's even like a quick scene right before that where he goes for his gun, but he doesn't have it. And he's like, and he books it. He's just like, whoops.
Yeah. So they get the artifacts back to the village, save the children. Yeah.
Back, new adventure. Maybe I'll be better. Anyway.
Maybe.
And
so that one, well, no, that's another one. I'll tie it in. We'll go to The Last Crusade next. So Last Crusade, I think that starts with the River Phoenix, young Indiana Jones.
You get a quick origin story of Indiana Jones. You get the whip, the scar on his chin, the hat. And nowadays, what they would have done is they would have made that 10-minute sequence into a whole movie. But like this 10-minute sequence is all you need to be like, yeah, this is Indiana Jones. This is where he came from. River Phoenix, perfect casting choice. I think he did phenomenal.
Actually,
you get his fear of snakes as well.
You know what? They did do this for a Harrison Ford character, and that movie was called Solo. We have seen this, actually.
I was trying to avoid that, Joe.
Sorry, I wasn't watching your face. I didn't realize you had a specific one in mind. I was just listening to you. And I realized it did happen.
Yeah, so we all know how Solo worked out. Anyway.
It nearly brought down the franchise.
It really did. That 10-minute sequence, I think, is perfect, especially when the guy puts the hat on Indiana Jones, and then he pans up and it's modern day Indiana Jones, and then the music swells, he's on the boat, he gives a little smirk. And that's one of those movies now where it'd be like, woo! Like the little cheer moment in the theater.
This belongs in a museum.
And yeah, it's just great. It's like, how many times do we have to run into each other, Mr. Jones? They're on the boat. That's a great opening as well. This is my favorite movie. This is my favorite. I love it. I love the chemistry between him and Sean Connery. I think they work so well off each other. Again,
definitely.
Steven Spielberg wanted to make a James Bond movie. He fucking cast James Bond in one of his movies. There's a lot of callbacks or homages to James Bond in these movies. Like I forgot to mention in Temple of Doom, the suit he's wearing is the white suit is an homage to the James Bond suit in Dr. No. Yeah.
Or was that from Russia with Love? It's one of the early ones.
The white suit, whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love The Last Crusade. Their chemistry is phenomenal. That opening scene is great. And you see him back as the professor again, where and he goes to the house, or no, he's mailed the diary, the Holy Grail diary, and he's like, why is this mailed to me? Then he goes over to checks his dad's place, and it's torn up, and he thinks he's been captured. And then we're off to are we off to Cairo again? Is that where we're at? Because I know Jonathan Rhys-Davies is back in this movie.
I think we're going to
Italy they go to Venice. Yeah, they go to Venice. What am I talking about? They go to Venice where they think last is. We meet up with Elsa, who, yeah, he didn't know she was a Nazi. I could see why he fell for her. Pretty easy.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that the scene in the church, or not the church. It was a library. It was a church that got turned into a library. That's the whole thing. He's trying to find the X marks the spot, and then he finds the X again and again. He's a dork. He's all giddy about it. Smash through it. They go into the basement with all those rats. Fun fact, those rats had to be breeded because if they used real rats, they all had disease. So they had to breed like 2,000 rats specifically for that movie.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
You think filmmakers will put in that kind of effort today? No, they just CGI the whole thing.
CGI, yeah. Absolutely.
That's why these old movies hold up better. You can tell they put more effort into them.
Yeah. Great scene there. I think, again, this is one of those movies, I think it's just one iconic scene after another. They find the Grail tablet, or the other half of the Grail tablet. Oh, we skipped that whole part where Indy's called over to the... Who's the villain in this movie? Belloc Diet. That guy.
Other Nazi guy.
The other secret Nazi guy, where he shows him half the half of the shield that's on her carving, and then he does a sketch out of it. That's where he puts on the professor glasses and then tells him, "Oh, your father's missing." Goes to find his father. Cut back to he finds the other half of the shield. I think that's another great little archaeology piece as well. They light that whole thing on fire. You see the rats screaming from the petroleum. You're like, oh my God, like destroying Elsa's hair at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a boat chase. Oh my, a boat chase in Venice? Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. And it's hilarious because that's such an iconic place in Venice. Whenever other films film there, I always think of Indiana Jones because he pops out of the sewer and is just in that little diner area outside of the church. And I think it's just a perfect spot for it.
Yeah, that boat chase scene I remember being pretty good. Very, how many things were doing boat chase scenes back then? On actual boats?
Probably none. And then he's trying to interrogate him, but the boat's getting more and more chopped up. And it's just
that's my favorite part about that is when the boat's getting chopped up by the propeller.
It's really getting chopped up too. I love practical stuff so much. Again, that'd be CGI.
And it would be obvious
if today.
too.
Yeah. But you're like, oh my God, they're in actual danger. They're in real life danger.
That's what makes it
and
better.
Then
that's why stunt people are so amazing. And why they need an Academy Award for it.
Oh, they did. Nice. And then they go to Scotland. Oh, they should. Yes. Absolutely should. And they go to Scotland, and then they go to the secret Nazi castle. And then that's where we are introduced to Henry Jones Sr.
Henry Jones Sr.
Pixar Jr. And I love how he turns immediately back into a little boy. He's like, yes, sir. It's like, what are you doing here? It's like, I'm here to rescue you.
And then there also that bit when he takes the machine gun. I told you. Don't call me Junior.
Look what you did.
And then
it's like, I love the other joke too, where it's like, how did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep. And then he looks at Sean Connery. He's just like, I was like, oh God, I'm Eskimo Brothers with my dad.
That's funny.
It's like, hey, you want to know where the charm comes from? Comes from Henry Sr.
Like father, like son.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the best parts about this movie is how similar they are, but they're too similar and they just conflict all the time. Yeah.
And then the tone in this, I think it also reflects Raiders as well. There's some serious moments, but there's also comedic moments. Like when the castle goes up on fire because like Henry Sr. drops the lighter and they go into the fireplace and then they turn it and then they accidentally turn around or turn the fireplace around and they're in this secret like Nazi communication area. And then one woman notices them and they're just like, they just smile at her.
And they turn back around, right?
Yeah. She's like, ah! Just a great escape scene where, and again, you think you're going to get into another boat chase, but then they pop out of this crate and it's the motorcycle and
the sidecar.
Sidecar. Oh, so good. And then they brought this up in another podcast that I was listening to, but because they were doing like the Indiana Jones movies before Dial of Destiny comes out as well. How when he like jousts the guy, and then you see like Henrietta Jones is like, I say Henrietta Jones, is that what I just said? Yeah. Henry Jones Sr. He sees like he's kind of giddy about it. He's like kind of getting excited about it, but whenever like Indiana Jones does something, he looks over to his dad for approval. He's just kind of like unfazed by it. He's just like not impressed. And he's just like, whatever. And just their chemistry together is just so good.
It's one of the best
pairings.
Anything.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I think it all accumulates into that scene in the blimp where they're like, you never had like an interest in me. It's like, did I ever tell you to go to bed, brush your teeth? It's like, I respected your privacy. It's like, you left when you were just becoming interesting. And he's like, what the hell am I supposed to say with that?
Yeah. It's about the tense relationship between fathers and sons. And once again, they're so similar, but they're so different. They both dedicated their life to archaeology. And once again, going back to someone like Belloc, I said, was Indiana Jones's dark mirror about what he could become if he used his archaeology for wealth and power. His dad is what he could become if he devoted his life to archaeology obsessively and had no other life.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think he realizes is kind of how he has been living his life for the entire franchise. This is all he does. He doesn't have a family. He doesn't have... He's never settled down. He's always going to be looking for these relics. And he doesn't want to end up like his father that way.
Mm-hmm.
Where it just... Which, you know, you get to the end of the movie and they have to give up the Grail, but that, like, his whole life's work ended up being for nothing in the end. He abandoned his son for nothing. But he did choose his son in the end, so that was what Indiana Jones needed to learn by the end of the movie, is that family and your loved ones are more important than things, even if those things are valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't replace the bonds we have in life, so even the flawed ones.
It's a fantastic movie. And there's another comedy bit where, like, Indiana Jones has this whole speech was like he's probably halfway across Cairo by now, and by even right now he probably has the Grail already. Cut to his buddy being lost in Cairo. He doesn't know a lick of like their language. Just one of the best cutaway jokes ever.
That's good.
I love I love Sean Connery and Indiana Jones together. They're just one of the best pairings. And even when you get to the final area, when they're into like the Grail cave or whatever, and it's just a shocking scene when Sean Connery gets shot. You feel it because you feel the bond throughout this whole movie, and you're like, oh fuck, because you grow with these characters and you learn to feel for these characters, and now Indiana Jones has a reason to get the Grail, and just those 3 tasks, phenomenal filmmaking, just so well done, just something out of like a Temple Run TV show where those kids, or maybe it was inspired by that, where you're just going through these 3 tasks where he has to kneel and avoid the spikes. He has to spell Jesus' name. And then the bridge scene, just amazing work of, I think it's a matte painting, which is pretty awesome. That makes sense. Where it's like the bridge is invisible, but it only looks invisible because of how it matches up with the wall behind it.
It's got a jump.
Oh, leap of faith. Cutting back to Sean Connery and Harrison
Ford. There's no hay bale even.
Yeah, it's insane. It's a great scene, and then they get to the final area, and it's just this old knight there, and it's just like, you have to take my place, and Indiana Jones is just like, no, listen, I'm just here, like I'm just trying to get the Grail, and then they do the switch out. They give the fake Grail to Belloc Light. Again, I don't know his name. And he has he starts to get older, and that effect where his hair grows out or something like that is just, it's one of those insane things. And funny enough, that's footage is actually in reverse. So how they filmed it is they had the hair and they pulled it through the head, like the stump or whatever, and then they just reversed it. If you go back and watch it, you can tell it's in reverse because the flames in the background are like going the wrong way. They're like flickering the wrong way. But you don't, because that's not where your eyes are. You're looking at the insane effect and Elsa's reaction to it as well. So it's a really well done effect.
It's just as memorable as the Nazi's face melting off in the Raiders of the Lost Ark there.
Child scarring scene.
I think one of my favorite...
Poorly. That's quoted all the time.
Classic. It's very usable in many contexts is the thing. My favorite thing about that ending there is that the Grail wasn't one of the many fancy ones. It's the crappiest looking one.
The carpenter, the cup of a carpenter,
yeah.
I don't know why, but I always thought that the knight was Alec Guinness. I don't know why. I knew it wasn't him as a kid growing up. I just always pictured like, that's Alec Guinness.
It's got Alec Guinness energy.
Yeah.
I can see for sure. Yeah, I like the knight being there for that long. But I just love how, to me, that just feels really important that the chalice was the just terrible because everyone is spending the last couple thousand years imagining it as this larger than life thing. Oh, it'll make you immortal, so it's got to be really, it's got to be larger than life. It's got to be mythical looking. It's got to be one of these beautiful looking things. But I think that also goes to the general theme of the movie about, well, once again, the father and son dynamic. It's just that that beauty's not where you think it is all the time. Everyone goes after the shiny chalices, and then he gets killed for it because he was going after the shiny thing instead of the thing of substance that actually mattered. You didn't choose the rough looking cup because you didn't think it was valuable. But yeah,
I love how Indy just goes for it too. Like he takes a second to take a sip, but he's just like, "Fuck it!" Like I got no time to be. I can save my dad, and I love that effect too, where he's pouring it on the wound, and at first it looks like it like corrodes the wound from like the gunshot wound, and then it just like pours it away, and like. Again, in real, it's just like makeup pouring away, but you're so invested into this. It's like, wow, it's just like, it's a simple effect, but it's just like, so well done.
Yeah, sure.
And then Elsa, I think what puts this movie, my favorite, is when Elsa takes the Grail away and she goes over the seal, everything breaks apart. She's starting to fall down, but Indiana has her. And then she's like, I almost got it. She falls down eventually. And then
he grabs
Indiana's there. He goes for he's like, I can almost reach it. And then his dad finally goes, Indiana. And he just looks at them, and I'm just like, oh. It's just the way he says it is just so well done. And then
First time he called him that, yeah.
And they both stand up, they see the knight, and he's just kind of like, I told you to do one thing. I told you not to go over the goddamn seal. And now I'm going to die here. But they just like, see ya. And then it's them running off into the sunset, off to the next adventure. Phenomenal movie.
At the time, we weren't alive, but you hoped there wouldn't be a last adventure because that was the perfect ending. They literally rode off into the sunset. That was it. It was good.
I just remember it's Marcus Brody. I just remember the friend's name.
Oh, it was Brody?
Yeah.
Right. And then they did a fourth one, and some people are okay with this. The people, I think, who are most okay with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull are us who grew up on it.
Yep.
Just like we are with the Star Wars prequels. I feel dated when I think of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because I still remember I saw it twice, I think. Once in theaters, and I still have the big popcorn bucket with the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull on it.
Ooh.
Still have that somewhere. Second time I saw it was at a drive-in movie theater, double feature, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Iron Man.
Wow.
That was 2008 for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a good night. Still remember that one.
That's a pretty good night. For all the people who like criticize Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, at least it's Harrison Ford trying. And that's what I hope happens in Dial of Destiny. Like when he tries in a film, he's phenomenal. Especially because he's had this critique about him when he's older that he doesn't really give a shit about anything anymore. But when he's on screen and he's trying in his role because he loves Indiana so much, it's still him. It's still Indiana. I think people really just get taken aback by Shia LaBeouf and the CGI and like the lens flares everywhere, but they forget to like recognize there's still magic in there. There's still, that Spielberg-esque type filming. There's still the John Williams score, and there's still Harrison Ford, and they're trying. And I think the archaeology scenes and the grave digging scenes are filmed really well. Like they're great set pieces. Yeah. And they thought, hey, years later, what do we think of? Do we go back to archaeology, or do we go really ambitious and say, hey, aliens? What if we tried that?
Which even then, that's a twist at the end. It's like a lot of problems I have with Kingdom of the Crystal. Well, not that I have.
But even then,
a lot of the problems that you can put back to other movies, right? If you say okay, well, most of the movie's grounded, and then the end is aliens. Well, why aren't you upset that the Ark of the Covenant basically proves God exists? or any of the other endings that are also like, okay, so that proves God exists. I think he defeats Molaram by activating the
tablets or whatever.
The tablets. So that proves those are magical and those work too. And and Last Crusade, they literally found the Holy Grail and it cured his dad's wounds. Like, once again, like, Judeo-Christian religion exists, and you find all that out at the end, but aliens is too far for you. Or what's like, he survives a nuke by hiding in a lead-lined fridge, but him falling out of an airplane, sliding down the Alps and over a cliff isn't too far for you as well.
Twice. He does it twice in that scene.
Yeah. Or when he, also widely criticized, I guess, but also when he had to drive on top of the U-boat to get to that destination and like to get to the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders, when he's hanging on top of the U-boat, like you said, that wasn't too much for that. Wasn't
have
too.
Have you seen the How It Should Have Ended for Kingdom of Crystal Skull? It's
At
got the
some
fridge.
point.
It's got the fridge popping open, and then Andrew's like, all my bones are broken.
Classic.
It's so funny. I love that channel so much.
They bring me joy consistently, for sure.
Yeah.
Still to this day, they don't post much anymore.
But I mean, it's a great for all the like the nuke thing stuff as well. It's a great set piece of just like an oh shit moment where he's escaped the Russians.
It's a great setup.
Goes to this town and then they're all plastic and you're like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? And then, yeah, it's lead lined, but it's silly. They've always been a little silly. And him looking at the mushroom cloud, yeah, he should have had radiation poisoning by then, but it's a great shot. As long, you can hate it as much as you want. It's a great shot. And it leads up to a joke where he's getting like, I keep saying like, he gets radiation bathed and bathed or whatever, and then they scrub down to like his nether regions and he's just like, it's like, how dare you? Like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one joke in this I really love where, also Kate Blanchett, I think she does phenomenal in this as the villain. Like, what if we had a full-on female villain, like full-on Russian, and we just get Kate Blanchett? I think she's great. She's got I think she has an iconic look to her. She has she's got a sword fight with Shia LaBeouf. But there's one point where they're interrogating Indiana Jones, and she tells him something like, "They're nothing mystical, something else out of this world." And Indiana Jones says to him, like, "What do you mean?" And she gives him a look, and then Indiana Jones just straight up goes, "Come on." To me, that's so funny. That's just like him being like, "You're full of shit."
Yeah, what I like,
little moments like that.
I did appreciate that it wasn't Nazis for a change, and I know a lot of people didn't like that, but I always liked how, the movie set in 1957. Of course, the Russians are going to be the bad guys. That's just the thing about Crystal Skull that people have to realize is that the original trilogy is based on pulp adventure serials George Lucas and Steven Spielberg grew up with from the 30s, whereas Crystal Skull is set in the 50s. Chronologically, that's logical. So they based that movie more on 1950s sci-fi because that was the big genre at the time. So, yeah, they still had to keep the archaeological component of Indiana Jones, but update it for a 1950s aesthetic and feel. And I think they accomplished their movie well. Those sci-fi movies of the 50s were cheesy. Yeah. And what I will say is they didn't do what they did with the original very well, though. Is they adapted a 1950s sci-fi B movie pretty well, but they didn't bring in that grit and seriousness that made like Raiders of the Lost Ark made those 1930s adventure serials serious. They kept the fun tone, but forgot to make it like fun. Grounded enough, They basically just remade those B movies without, you know what I'm saying? I'm having trouble vocalizing it right now. But they had
there's
a way
definitely a tonal difference from like this movie to the first.
Yeah. So it wasn't the fact that they adapted those kind of movies. It's the fact that they didn't. Yeah, they didn't update it enough for modern audiences. Yeah. So if you still look at it as a cheesy B movie, it works.
Yeah, I think
it does. Works. It does what it's trying to do.
Yeah,
it's just a shame that they had to do that with Indiana Jones for. Mm-hmm. But it still works.
I actually like the 50s aesthetic a little bit, and it gets a little cheesy at some points with the greasers versus like the jocks in that bar at one point. But even that chase, I think, is done well, where they're in the motorcycle and he's driving away.
I think that's the only practical fight scene in the whole movie.
Probably, yeah.
The rest of it's very heavily computer generated. Which, Lucasfilm was in this weird phase back then, right? Mm-hmm. This is...
Because George Lucas was pushing them a lot to go into digital because he was trying to pioneer people. Or be the pioneer of it.
The visual palette of the movie is clearly digital film in the 2000s. They hadn't quite figured it out how to make it look good yet. Mm-hmm. And CGI is everywhere because George Lucas always wanted to push the special effects. And I'm sure they did a lot of great effects work on that movie, mind you. I think a lot of it's really good, especially for 2008. I'm sure a lot of it was mind-blowing at the time.
Yeah.
Doesn't hold up as well today, unfortunately. But it pushed the medium of special effects filmmaking forward.
Mm-hmm. And there's still some like practical elements in there. Especially when they're going into the final temple and they're pulling out the rocks and the sand's pouring out. And then there's the mixture of the CGI there where they're all about to collide with each other. And I think I'm going to say when they're running down the stairs and the stairs are slowly closing, that's also practical as well, I want to say, just from memory. But those monkeys definitely weren't practical.
Did we count Shia LaBeouf among them?
No, sadly he's practical. I mean, yeah, so Shia LaBeouf in recent years has not been the greatest person, but he's still a decent actor. And I think he gets a little bit too much hate here because he is a bit of a whiner and a bit of a know-it-all, but that is the character of that generation, right? It's the 50s greaser, it's the rebel, it's the I don't want to listen to you, dad mentality.
This is
and
also...
I think he's...
Yeah. It's like, if you're looking to Indiana Jones compared to this greaser, right? This is a young punk kid, has never really known, like, real hardship. I mean, I guess he never knew his dad, so that sucks. But you look at Indiana Jones, this is a guy who's fought Nazis, seen war zones, been through hell, had his life threatened so many times. This greaser, who's got some daddy issues, isn't really... He just looks like a whiner, right? Yeah. Compared to this old, grizzled hero. But I think the movie plays that up better than, once again, a modern movie would. Where, once again, a modern movie would actively make Indiana Jones look worse for being the old man. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't really respect his experiences, and that's why I'm worried for Dial of Destiny. I don't know how they're going to handle Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She's either going to be what I fear she'll be, or she'll actually be compelling. She's either going to be the one who is like, they set up her as his replacement and make her better than him at everything and have her show him up at everything and have her lecture him at every turn when he's doing things not the way a 1970s woman would want it done. My 70s woman, I mean 2020. But yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I am a little worried,
equals, and he'll be more, he'll be her mentor and he'll be a flawed older guy with some. Yeah.
I trust James Mangold. I don't trust modern story writers.
I trust Mangold. I don't trust Kathleen Kennedy, though. That's my problem. Okay? I'll say it.
We bring her up every other episode.
She's a frequent... I can't call her a nemesis or a rival because she doesn't care about us at all.
She'll be a guest one day. Imagine.
So what were you thinking in those years?
Why is this all your fault? But yeah, it's funny you bring up the equal parts or the Indiana Jones not being lesser than, because in Kingdom of Crystal Skull, he's the same. He's the same as he was in the originals. And what the standout scene is when it's him and Mutt. That's probably why people are mad, because his name's Mutt. And
Indiana was the dog's name.
That's true. Named after the dog? Anyway. When they're going through that scene and it's that one, the balancing thing, where Indiana crawls through and then Mutt's freaking out because he disappears. And then Indiana Jones crawls back because he can tell it's just a balancing thing. And he's just casually just like staring. I'm like, calm down. I think that's great too. Just Harrison Ford is great. Just facial acting as well.
Yeah. I also like that it makes...
John Hurt's in this movie too. The late John Hurt. Rest in peace.
Who is he again?
He's the crazy guy. He's the crazy...
okay.
The guy who finds the Crystal Skull at first.
I think he was a professor too.
Mm-hmm.
One of their temporaries.
Yeah.
I like that this movie... I wrote it down. Oxley. Harold Oxley. I like that this movie gave Indiana Jones a chance to be a father as well. Because you go from Last Crusade, where the father-son dynamic was a big part about that, and you finally get to see what he'd be. Why the hell did you
finish school?
You finally get to see what he'd be like as a father, and he's a lot more like his father than he'd want to be. Mm-hmm. Is what he realizes, I think, in the course of the movie. He treats Mutt a lot like Henry Sr. treated him. And I think at the beginning of the movie, you do find out that Henry Sr. died at some point.
Yeah.
Off camera. So he was thinking about him at a point, and I guess they reconciled at some point, but his relationship with Mutt's an important stepping stone for him as a character, because it lets him have the family he never had before, lets him try his hand at, my father was kind of a dick to me, and I feel like I have to, my first instinct is to repeat those patterns on you, my son, but I should know better because I didn't like that, so I'll try to be better. Mm-hmm. Which, once again, you don't have to demean him as a character to do that. Once again, that's what I was saying before. He can still be the flawed old man with old ways of thinking, but don't tear him down just to prop the new generation up is the problem. Yeah. The new generation can be right sometimes. That's fine. But you don't have to make him look like a weak idiot.
He doesn't know it's his kid till halfway through the movie. And we forgot to mention, Marion's back. Marion's the mom, everyone. And she does great. They pick up where they left off. She looks great. She almost clocks him again as soon as she sees him. Mm-hmm. And I love that first interaction. Is like, you said her name was Mary. Marion, and he's freaking. I was like, Marion Crane is your mother.
That's good. I think one of my favorite scenes around that point that I remember was when he gets caught in quicksand and they have to pull him out with a snake.
Yeah. Don't say the snake. Say grab the rope. And they grab the rope.
Okay.
Don't worry, we're fine as long as there's not a gas leak. Boop. Shit.
Yeah, Crystal
Oxley,
Skulls.
find help. And he brings the Russians. Help. Great job, Ox.
Crystal Skull's got its moments.
Yeah. One scene that kind of scarred me as a kid was the fire ant scene. Yeah. When the guys were getting eaten by the fire ants. I was like, oh God, is that what fire ants are? And the answer is kind of. Don't get in their way.
Terrifying.
Oof.
So it's
got its moments.
Just to bring everything together, what I've been meaning to bring up throughout this podcast is the general theme of Indiana Jones, I think, is respect the past, and also there are things in this world that we are not meant to possess. There is knowledge we are not supposed to have or try to obtain. You can revere it, you can know about it. Just know that there are things out in space or gods. There are things beyond us that we're not ready for. And that theme is pretty hammered home in every single movie. The bad guys the Nazis go after the Ark of the Covenant. They open it. They look upon whatever God's got in there. Faces melt. They can't take it. So metal of them. But in Temple of Doom, the bad guy Morin, he's brought down by, and he basically throws all the stones in the water, and they're all activated and they're burning, and then Morin can't stand to let the last one go, so it's burning in his hands until he lets go of the rope ladder, and then he gets eaten by crocodiles. So his hubris brought him down there. In the third one, the Nazi, once again, going after the Holy Grail. In his hubris, he picks the nicest looking one because, well, of course it's the nicest looking one. He drinks it, even though everyone tells him it's a bad idea. He lacks the wisdom to know he probably shouldn't even be trying. And then in the last one, what's her name? The
Elsa.
Svalko. Yeah, Ilsa. Irina Svalko. She asks the alien for information, and then the alien gives her so much intake at once, her mind melts from the inside as well, because her mind can't fathom it. And that's just the running thread throughout all these movies, is Indy gets out of these problems basically by doing the opposite. He reveres the Ark enough to go looking for it, but he's wise enough to not look at it when it's opened. He saves one stone to give back to the village people, but even though he's interested in it for fame and fortune more at this point in his career, because this is before he became the hero, but he's also got the humility enough to try not to keep it. He's willing to let it go. Even though he's spent the whole movie trying to get it, he's willing to let it go. He doesn't get the Grail, once again, for fame and fortune or to keep it away from the Nazis, but he has to do it to save his father. So he's thinking a little more critically about it. And then he's also willing to let that one go. And in Crystal Skull, he's meeting otherworldly beings, but also he knows well enough to leave it alone. This is something that is beyond him and his culture, and he just, whatever they have to say, he can't fathom. So let's just get out of here. Because I guess at this point he's learned his lesson. All the bad guys who keep pushing, they end up getting killed for it. Mm-hmm. So the obsessiveness isn't worth it. Pushing for certain knowledge isn't worth it. Just kind of know your limit and don't go on the other side of that. So that's, yeah. And also, like I said, respect history and old remains. I also think it's kind of funny that Indiana Jones never really believes in anything spiritual.
Never.
Even faced with all this crazy stuff, he never really believes in it. They're all just old artifacts to him. Weird stuff happens around him. But I think on some level he must believe, because otherwise he probably would do something like look at the Ark, right? If he didn't,
exactly.
He's seen enough to know that it's better to, even if you don't believe, it's better to, if it does exist, then it's better to follow the rules.
Right.
Because at least that way he won't get killed for it, right? So yeah. I guess that's another lesson of Indiana Jones. Even non-believers should follow some of the rules just in case.
Some of them.
Yeah. I mean, you can pick and choose, I guess, but you don't know. That's the thing. At the end of the day, you don't know what's out there, what's beyond our purview, and you might be damned for all you know, but not following the rules, or maybe there's nothing out there and you'll be fine. But who knows? Maybe it's safer to believe. That's what Indiana Jones would have you believe. Stay skeptical.
It'll be interesting to see what this next movie is about in terms of, because I haven't researched it at all. It's just theories. And I heard one theory was about something to do with Greek mythology, which personally would be really cool. but I know they're more so going back to mythical type stuff. And
Okay.
I think the marketing of this film is done decently well. I think
don't know a
but
lot about it.
in terms of not giving away a lot. And I think they've just hyped up more the deepfake technology than the actual story.
Yeah.
But from the trailers, they look phenomenal effects wise. So
Yeah.
we are worried because of reasons. But hey, if Top Gun Maverick can be one of the top 10 movies of last year, why can't Indiana Jones?
Because of Lucasfilm's track record.
Okay. Well, I was trying to be positive.
I know. If it, I don't like how new franchises handle old heroes. If you told me this was a Indiana Jones Legacy installment starring Phoebe Waller-Bridge or whatever, and it was just like it had nothing to do with Harrison Ford, or even if it was starring Shia LaBeouf, whatever, I'd be a little more hopeful, nearly, because I'd be like, you know what, you can't ruin it any worse. It's like maybe you'll mess up the legacy, but you're not gonna ruin or kill Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
At least, so. But, or maybe it's a great send-off for Harrison Ford and I'll eat my words. I don't know. I'd rather go in skeptical and be surprised than be let down.
I hope so. I think he said this is his last one.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford.
John Williams is retiring after this one, too.
Mm-hmm. Might as well. I mean, John Williams, what a legend. This is as much his franchise as much as both Spielberg and Harrison Ford's.
And that's why I'm worried, I think, is because as much as I respect James Mangold as a filmmaker, it does make me worried that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg declined to participate. Because to me, this is their thing.
Right.
This was based on the stuff they loved. This was, for better or worse, in the case of Crystal Skull or whatever, you know, George Lucas is a great storyteller. He's incredibly inventive. Steven Spielberg's got a magical touch with the behind the camera. It's just their duo together is what makes Indiana Jones feel how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
It's a passion project. It's not corporate or trying to appeal to our nostalgia or whatever legacy installments do nowadays. They wouldn't have made a movie that is maybe 100% crowd pleasing, but it would have felt right. It would have felt true to their vision. Same way I feel about Crystal Skull. However you feel about it as a movie, it still feels enough like Indiana Jones that it made by Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. It didn't feel like Indiana Jones made by some random executive who was just trying to make money.
Right.
There was still a level of care put behind it. I just don't have the confidence that they'll do again. So, we'll see.
I hear what you're saying, and that is definitely a big red flag in terms of that. But a part of me also wants to think that they were working on other stuff. And I also think a huge factor here is they wanted to do a fifth film for the longest time, and Harrison Ford wasn't signing off on it, and then he finally signed off on it. So, hopefully, the reason he did that is because the story was good enough. I have faith in that, where he, I mean, that's the same reason he didn't do Blade Runner for the longest time. And then he saw the story and saw that they were casting Ryan Gosling, or maybe I think he suggested Ryan Gosling. And Blade Runner 2049, I'll say right here, I think is better than the original. I'm not going to say Dial of Destiny is probably better than the originals, but
all right,
it's definitely my most, not anticipated, but my most, oh fuck, I hope it's good movies of the year.
Yeah, I hope so too. Here's my hot take of the day. I didn't like Blade Runner. Haven't seen 2049. Didn't like the original Blade Runner. And for those of you wondering, I watched the final cut, I believe it was.
The original's okay. I'm in the same boat as you.
There's like 3 different cuts of it. I saw the final cut, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Blade Runner 2049 is very good.
Yeah. I'll get around to that one eventually. I'm a big Denis Villeneuve fan. I think he's one of the best directors working today, and I'm disappointed. I was about to say. Yeah. So why do you think the character of Indiana Jones endures for so many decades? through all this?
I think he's just an icon. He's just an icon of film. And again, it all goes back to that first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You have so many iconic scenes, and you have this guy who's not all good or all bad. You just have this charismatic, dirty looking man who is just trying to, uncover this holy treasure while also defeating the bad guys and also trying not to get killed. You have the amazing music backing him by John Williams. I just think he's a character that literally anybody can relate to because of how gray he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because it hasn't been prequeled or sequeled too hard where it's a recast and it's tied so much to one certain actor, it's more iconic because of that. Like, say, if, like, for instance, Luke Skywalker is iconic, but to me, he's become a little bit less iconic because of the deep fakes, because of the, not the recasting, but the AI voice stuff later on.
You keep using him, yeah.
You keep using him. Obi-Wan was iconic as Alec Guinness, but now he's this different type of iconic as Ewan McGregor. Darth Vader is very, and why am I only using Star Wars properties? That he is this iconic person because of James Earl Jones, because of his voice, the way each actor in the suit embodies him, but the emotion behind James Earl Jones's voice, that is it. That is Darth Vader, iconic piece of cinema. It's the same with Top Gun Maverick or Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. People go to see those movies because they love Ethan Hunt and they love what crazy stunt can Tom Cruise do next. So when you tie an actor to a character and it's just them for most of the franchise, and you give them the love, respect, and care, and the writing to back it up, the music to back it up, the directing to back it up, the set design to back it up, all the types of things, it's just rememberable. I mean, there's reasons why people love Casablanca to this day. There's reasons why people love Gone with the Wind to this day because they're iconic characters, and they stand the test of time. And Indiana Jones is one of those characters.
I think Indiana Jones, a lot like James Bond, is defined a lot by how we define a masculine ideal in a way. He, like you said, he can be that dirty, grimy guy who gets his hands dirty, crawls through the cobwebs and the bugs and the temples and can kick all kinds of ass. But he's also the guy who can put on a tweed jacket and glasses and lecture charismatically in a hall, in a lecture hall. He's got a stable job. He doesn't have to do these globe-trotting adventures, but he goes to these exotic locations, mutes beautiful women. He fights bad guys for good reasons. He looks to preserve history, but he's also kind of a nerd about history too. He's very passionate about things, and he's not all cool about it all the time. He's a vulnerable hero as well. He can be hurt. He could even be killed, but he always escapes through his wits, just barely. And that's fun to watch too. He's never always on top. The fun about Indiana Jones is that he's always one step behind, trying to get ahead. And I think we all feel that way to an extent. But through our wits and a bit of charisma and a bit of skill, we can not get ahead, but get a little less out from behind. And I also think what works about Indiana Jones is just the timelessness of his stories. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, as I've mentioned many, many times in this episode today, they loved their 1930s serials, and they made people in the 80s love those same kind of serials, and we love Indiana Jones today, because once again, this kind of masculine ideal of being a badass but also a gentleman at the same time, that's timeless. But also going to crazy locations around the earth and fighting bad guys, and that stuff will always be appealing. I think like Nazis will always be bad guys. That's never going to age badly, right? I mean,
I
you look
agree.
at stuff like that. Bullwhips and fedoras will always be cool.
Mhm.
Sure.
Satchels.
Sure. The Steven Spielberg filmed so much of it like it was always meant to be iconic. Like I said, right from that opening silhouette, just from his image, you can tell Indiana Jones. I mean, how many guys in the 40s wore fedoras, right? You know, every film noir movie, you watch some guys wearing a fedora. That's just the style. But Steven Spielberg, just with a couple silhouette shots, linked that kind of image to Indiana Jones so thoroughly that he's baked into our collective consciousness just from a shadow alone, which is pretty crazy. His filmmaking is timeless as well. It's the practical effects. It's the John Williams score. The kind of classical composition never goes out of style. The action scenes are amazing. Like you said, Harrison Ford, just linked to that character forever. Such a great performer. And like I said, it's Lucasfilm firing on all cylinders. It's the best talents of their era, all working on this passion project that they didn't really have any strings attached on, and just them making the best thing they can possibly make. And of course, it still holds up, I'm glad to say. It's a timeless product all around. Just everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know about how the new one's going to hold up, but the originals are definitely classic for a good reason.
Yeah.
So.
Look, I have faith. I have faith in James Mangold. He's never made a bad movie. He's made one of my favorite movies of all time, Logan. Yep. So I just hope we don't cut to me in 2 weeks and I'm just like this. I'm just just eating my words. I trust him. I trust the cast. I just don't know anything about the story. That's all I don't know right now. I think what Indiana Jones needs, he needs a, not iconic, but he needs a unique artifact to chase after. Yeah. I think that's what it is. Like unique, but also just iconic as well. Because who know? Like I didn't know anything about the Ark of the Covenant before this movie, but I knew what the Holy Grail was.
Yeah,
I knew what that was, and I'm sure there were some people in the Hindu religion who knew about the Great Kali and Temple of Doom and her totems as well. And Kingdom Crystal Skull went full out and said, "Here's an alien skull that's made out of crystal." They're like, "Oh, that's unique." Yeah. He just needs that. So the Dial of Destiny is a weird choice, whatever that means. But
I forgot to mention this for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but one thing I appreciated about it a lot, which I don't think the new one will deliver, is a good ending. To me, it delivered already. I mean, if Last Crusade was the perfect ending with him and his father and I think Salo riding off into the sunset on the horses, that was amazing. But I love how Kingdom of the Crystal Skull ended too. He's wedded to Marion, they're walking out, and Indy's fedora ends up on the floor. Mutt picks it up, he's about to put it on, and then Indy snatches it out of his hands and puts it on as they leave the chapel. You're not going to get an ending like that in Dial of Destiny, I guarantee you. It's going to be, you're probably going to do a passing of the torch to Phoebe Waller-Bridge, or he's going to die, or something. But I love, this is what I'm talking about. It's just, you had that tease in there of, oh, is Shia LaBeouf going to take over? Or is this going to be a passing of the torch? And then it's just a wordless Harrison Ford takes the cap back and is like, nope, I'm still Indiana Jones, even right at the end, puts the hat back on. Not to say there can't be a successor, but it's just a subtle visual way of saying, nope, it's still me. It's always going to be me.
I don't think there should be a successor. after this. I think the franchise should just die with Harrison Ford. Because you're never going to beat it. It's just going to be how The Mummy was, the 1990 Mummy, where you can tell it's very much Indiana Jones diet, where they have Brendan Fraser dressed up in sort of an Indiana Jones getup, but not really. He's got the dual pistols, or just the one pistol, I don't remember. And it's kind of like that. Or when anybody does a archaeology movie, it's always ties to Indiana Jones. So,
yeah.
And it's never going to be topped.
How many imitators has Indiana Jones inspired?
All of them.
Anything that does archaeology after Indiana Jones was... I mean, off the top of my head, The Mummy was one I forgot about, but I was also thinking Tomb Raider and Uncharted, which are pretty obvious.
Yeah. And Uncharted's different because in that video game world, you're controlling Nathan. And I haven't played them yet, but he has kind of become his own iconic character, but he's still like a level below Indiana Jones.
Nathan Drake is Indiana Jones if he was born like 60 years later.
Yeah.
He's a modern update for it.
And if he had an actual license to kill. Nathan Drake kills hundreds of people.
I think I killed thousands.
Going for the platinum?
They do have a list of stats, and you can see your body count in them. It's excessive. Anyway, Indiana Jones, fantastic. We'll see you next time for Dial of Destiny. I think that's coming out end of June, right?
June 30th.
Okay, so that'll probably be the next episode. Let's plug our socials and get out of here.
All right, well, you can find me at Ryan Walker Official on YouTube, TikTok, and on Instagram.
And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at ThoughtPlane Media. Also, check out the Close Up with Ryan and Joe Facebook page for latest updates on the show. If you listen to us on audio, check out our YouTube channel. And if you're on YouTube, find us anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. We hope to see you on the next Close Up with Ryan and Joe, where we review Dial of Destiny, for better or for worse. What'll it be? Find out. Till next time.
Copyright.